Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. So I found today's story in one of my all-time favorite books. The book is called Colorado and the Italians in Colorado, and it is such a great book. I actually ordered it when I did the episode on Angelo Noce, so that I could get a little bit, because he helped write this book. It was published in 1922, and it's amazing. It has stories about Denver/Colorado Italians. It has advertisements from 1922, which are primarily Italian American business advertisements, some not. It has like these fold out maps. It's crazy.
It's really neat. I remember going through that, looking at all the ads.
All the ads and stuff. Yeah, it's like this interactive like pop-up book for Italians. Yeah. Adult Italians. It's pretty cool. So the other day I was flipping through it and I ran across a one-page bio on a man named Joseph Bona. And I thought, you know what? I should research this guy. This is kind of cool. And I'm so glad that I did. He is really fascinating. So we're just going to dive on into his story.
Okay.
So Joseph Bona was, according to the Denver Post, quote, one of Denver's most widely known and colorful residents. So that's a pretty interesting way to describe Joseph. He was also a mortician at Olinger's Mortuary and was even the mortician for Buffalo Bill Cody.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's probably going to be one of the big moments of this whole episode is when we get to that part. So Olinger's has been in the Denver area for a very long time. They actually had a mortuary in Boulder, Colorado, but they had a mortuary just right down the road from Mom's high school in Denver when she grew up.
Right. North High.
Yep, North High. And you could see it from your church, St. Dominic's.
Right. Yeah, it was around all the time, ever since I can remember. So
saw the smokestacks.
Yeah. Didn't understand that, though.
Right, exactly.
Till I got older.
Well, today it is actually, the Olingers, they sold it off, I think, in I ran across it 80s or 90s. I can't remember. But the building is still there, and somebody's bought it and actually turned it into a restaurant.
It's kind of cool, but it's kind of eerie too.
Yeah. For like, Mom can't wrap her head around it.
Right.
But I think growing up right around that area and probably understanding what it is, I totally get it.
Yeah.
So now the restaurant is called Linger's. My husband Jared and I, we actually ate there, and it was pretty cool. I mean, you do have that creep factor when you go in, for sure, but they would serve you drinks in old medicine pharmacist bottles.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember you telling me you guys ate there, but...
And her reaction was like, oh my gosh, you did? And I was like, yeah, we had to.
What did you have?
Oh,
chicken fingers?
Chicken fingers, something like that. No, really, like, I think their menu, don't quote me on this because it's been a long time, but I think their menu was like kind of played off the whole mortuary thing. But yeah, they did a great job on it. It was really cool. They had photos up and stuff. So
nice.
But getting back to Joseph, he was born on November 25th, 1887 in Chicago, Illinois. His parents were Joseph Bona and Margaret Kelly. So Joseph Sr., he came to America from Italy in 1873 and settled in Chicago, where he married Margaret in 1884. And the couple had 4 children. Joseph Jr. was the second oldest. So Joseph's father, he worked as a carriage driver for an undertaker in Chicago, according to the 1910 census. And this may explain kind of how...
kept it in the family.
Kind of how he became interested in becoming a mortician. So... When Joseph graduated high school, he attended Rush Medical College, also known as the College of Anatomy and Embalming, where he studied how to become a mortician.
Oh, okay. Was that medical college in Denver?
I'm sorry. It was in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh,
I apologize. Yeah. So he attended high school and college in Chicago. But in 1910, he decided he wanted to move to Denver. And he arrived in Denver by train and applied for a job at Brown's Funeral Home. They offered him the job and he accepted. And the funeral home actually gave him a place to stay at the mortuary. And I'm not sure what exactly enticed him to move to Denver. And I'm not even sure he knew because while on the train, he struck up a conversation with the porter. And so Joseph told the porter that he had some new embalming equipment with him. And the porter told him, hey, you should apply at Brown's Mortuary. So he gets off the train and applies at Brown's Mortuary. So I'm not really sure.
That all worked.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like he had quite the solid plan, but he knew he was going to Denver. So But after working at Brown's for a while, George Olinger, so the owner of Olinger Mortuary, started hearing about how skillful Joseph was. So George found Joseph one day and offered him a job, and Joseph accepted.
So that's how it all started.
It all started, yeah. And this turned out to be a great career move for him because Joseph would eventually become general manager, vice president, president, and eventually part owner of Olinger Mortuary.
Oh, wow.
And then in 1911, the Denver Post discussed how beloved Joseph was and how great of a manager he was at Olinger. So you have to think, he has only been in Denver a year.
Yeah, that's moving up the ladder fast.
So yeah, he was really thriving at Olinger's. When I wrote that sentence, I text Mom and a picture of it. I'm like, look what I just wrote. I can't believe I wrote that. But then afterwards, I was like, yeah, I'm leaving it in there. It's kind of funny.
It makes you grin.
It does. So over the next few years, I'm not really sure what happened in Joseph's life, but I imagine, he's probably enjoying his career. He's a young bachelor guy, enjoying the new city, that kind of stuff. However, in 1917, a pivotal moment in his life occurred when he was tasked with embalming the legendary Buffalo Bill Cody.
Wow.
And so this is one of my favorite parts of this whole story coming up here. So really quick, let's just talk about who Buffalo Bill Cody was. Buffalo Bill Cody was born William Frederick Cody on February 26, 1846 in Iowa, but he actually ended up growing up in Kansas. And his father died when he was really young, which was hard on the family and obviously on him. I saw somewhere that his father was killed actually because of his anti-slavery stance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it sounds like, there's probably a whole story there as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But when Buffalo Bill Cody, when he turned 14, he became a writer for the Pony Express, and this set off a life of adventures for him. The whole cowboy kind of bug bit him, and he was ready. So he would work as a buffalo hunter, supplying meat to railroad workers. And at this time, he gained the nickname of Buffalo Bill. And later, he served as a scout for the U.S. Army during conflicts with Native American tribes. In 1883, he created Buffalo Bill's Wild West, and it was a traveling show that, kind of dramatized the frontier life. And they would have like sharpshooting displays and reenactments. And he had people perform in his show like Annie Oakley, Sitting Bull. And this show became an international sensation. And that's kind of what made him famous, was his Buffalo Bill show.
Oh, nice. Probably traveled with that show.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I think he traveled all over the world. So Cody, he died on January 10th, 1917 in Denver, Colorado. He was 70 years old. And he passed away from kidney failure caused by complications from just kind of chronic health issues, including uremia. So uremia is a serious medical condition that occurs when the kidneys fail to filter waste products from the blood. So basically, kidney failure is what he passed away from. And at this time, Cody had been staying with his sister Mary in Denver when he became gravely ill. As soon as he passed, the news, it spread very quickly across the country, across the globe. And in fact, his sister even received a telegram from President Woodrow Wilson saying, quote, "May I express my sincere sympathy with you in the death of Colonel Cody," because he was a colonel in the army. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
After he passed, the family had his body sent to Olinger Mortuary, where Joseph, at the age of 29, was put in charge of preparing and embalming his body. He put Cody's body in a dark business suit and placed him in a solid bronze casket. Now, Buffalo Bill's death, it was not without controversy, because Denver and Wyoming would end up fighting over where to bury Cody. So Cody's will, it did state that he wanted to be buried in Cody, Wyoming. Buffalo Bill Cody, Cody, Wyoming. It was the town he founded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. However, his family did produce an updated will saying that he wanted to be buried at Lookout Mountain in Golden, Colorado. And so one of the things that he loved about Lookout Mountain was he believed you could see 4 states if you looked out from Lookout Mountain. And he just thought it was such a beautiful view. So, and you and I have been there.
Right. It is beautiful there.
Quite the drive up there.
Yeah, that's quite the windy road.
Yep. And then coming back down, you can burn your brakes out if you're...
Yep. That's what I did.
Yep.
Well, it didn't burn them out, but got them hot.
Got him hot, yeah. He was, however, ultimately buried at Lookout Mountain. And the funeral, it was quite the spectacle. So Cody had directed in his will that all the societies he was a member of were to participate in his funeral in some way.
Oh, wow.
So, and I am not going to list everything because it's a huge list of organizations that he participated.
I'm sure.
So, but the Grand Army of the Republic and the Denver Elks Lodge was in charge of the funeral services, and the Pioneer Society of Colorado and Cowboy Rangers also helped with the funeral services. It was a pretty big deal.
I'm sure.
On January 15th, they had his body moved to the rotunda of the Colorado State Capitol, and his body was available for viewing from 9 a.m. to noon that day. And they said that more than 18,000 people came to the viewing.
Wow.
Yeah, they even ended up leaving the viewing open an additional half hour so that they could let more people see. And they said that when they closed the doors, there was probably still about 12,000 people waiting outside to view his body.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the lines?
No. And what year was this?
1917.
Good grief.
So Joseph, for his part, he was acknowledged for doing a really good job at preserving Cody's body since it had to be on display for so many days, because remember, he died on the 10th and they displayed his body on the 15th. And now another interesting fact about his burial was that the snow made it impossible to actually get the body back up to Lookout Mountain. This is January in Colorado.
I was just wondering that when we were talking about how the road is, and this is January.
And this is January of 1917. We don't have asphalt. This is dirt.
Yeah.
So it made it impossible to get the body back up there. So they actually had to store the body in Olinger's vault until Memorial Day. And it even says that on his death certificate, where they say like where the body was buried. They didn't put Lookout Mountain because he wasn't there. It even says vault at Olinger's Mortuary.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'll post that picture up on Instagram.
Yeah.
So now there were rumors that Cody's body was secretly removed from Colorado and sent to Cody, Wyoming. However, Joseph swears that this never happened. Now, as I was researching this episode, I ran across a Facebook post from the great niece of Joseph, and she remembers Joseph as being a great storyteller, and he loved to tell the story of how he was put in charge of preparing Buffalo Bill's body. Well, she actually wrote this story down at some point and posted it on Facebook, and I'm going to read it now. And I just have to say, buckle in, because this is amazing. I love this part. I couldn't believe it when I ran across this. Okay, so her story starts, my uncle, Joe Bona, was an amazing man. Actually, he was my great uncle because he married my grandmother's younger sister. But he was my godfather. I felt this act of baptism gave me special possessive rights to him. Besides being a rather prosperous mortician, Uncle Joe was a fine storyteller. He would often entertain a family gathering with outrageous tales. This was one of my favorites. On the afternoon of January 10th, 1917, the Olinger Funeral Home had a call from one of the houses on High Street. The caller identified herself as May Decker. She said that her brother had died and she needed to make arrangements for his funeral. Uncle Joe noted that the woman's voice reflected more annoyance than grief, but off they went, Uncle Joe and a man named Harry. A tired-looking woman opened the door of the house on High Street. She led the two solemn undertakers through the gloomy rooms to the back of the house and indicated a narrow, dark stairway to the second floor of the house. She told them her brother was in the bedroom at the top of the stairs, and she retreated into the shadows. But Uncle Joe said that under his black coat and stiff-collared shirt, a chill ran down his spine and goosebumps erupted on his arms. So nonetheless, the twosome mounted the steep stairs to the landing, turned, and continued to the top. The shades were drawn and the day was overcast. It was difficult to see in the near darkness. Sure enough, there, stretching from the very top to the very foot of the iron bed, still clad in his nightshirt and covered to his chin with a sheet, lay their corpse. He was stiff, white, and very dead indeed. Uncle Joe peered into the face of the deceased. The dead man bore a striking resemblance to someone he had seen before in the newspapers and on gaudy colored posters. He was often astride a great white horse, waving his hat in the air, his beard and long golden hair shining. Instead of a thick mane, the corpse was nearly bald. Uncle Joe peered around the room. On the dresser were the distinguished locks. Yes, there on the bed in front of him, he was certain, was the famous Buffalo Bill.
Oh, so he didn't know when they got called to there.
No, They had no idea who they were going to pick up. That's probably quite a shock.
And he wore a wig?
Probably just when he got older.
Yeah.
He probably lost his hair because he passed away. He was 70 when he passed away.
Yeah.
So Uncle Joe beckoned Harry to the bedside to confirm his suspicions. The two black-clad undertakers nodded solemnly. The corpse on the bed could be no other than the famous Buffalo Bill in the flesh. And then she puts in parentheses, so to speak. That's pretty funny. This was not a situation to be taken lightly. Uncle Joe paced the creaky floor. This did indeed present marvelous possibilities. But first things first, their celebrity needed to be whisked forthwith to the Olinger funeral home. In silent dignity, the sheet was removed, the nightshirt stretched below the knobby knees, and the board, with many holes in it, known simply as the cooling board, was moved under the corpse. Because Cody was a tall man, the transfer was most difficult. Oh man, this gets great here. The transfer was simple compared to their next problem. The stairs were very steep and the cooling board smooth and slippery. Yeah, this is not good. The dead weight of Mr. Cody threatened to topple poor Harry, the forward bearer. Hold your end higher, directed Uncle Joe, safely bringing up the rear. When they finally reached the landing, there was an even more serious problem. Try as they might, there was no way to maneuver Buffalo Bill and the cooling board around the corner. There they were, wedged together in the tiny passageway. The two undertakers, the corpse, the sheet, and the cooling board. Uncle Joe, now disheveled and perspiring, had to come up with a plan. He had one. There was only one way to get Buffalo Bill down the stairs. Back to the bedroom they struggled. "We have to fold him in half," Uncle Joe told Harry. "In half?" gasped wide-eyed Harry.
I was just going to say that.
"In half," nodded Uncle Joe. Cody was returned to the bed. Uncle Joe placed one of his large arms around Buffalo Bill's neck and the other under his knees. With a mighty effort, he pulled his arms together. The cracking noises caused poor Harry to grasp the dresser in a near faint.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I was wondering if...
Yeah, because...
You're not flexible.
Bodies change after
Right.
death, so... Uncle Joe directed Harry to carry the cooling board and the sheet and go ahead of him to the bottom of the stairs. Both men prayed that May Decker would not be waiting for them. Uncle Joe was a big man and quite strong, but heaving the corpse to his shoulder took every bit of his strength. Uncle Joe was weaving down the stairs under his heavy burden. He made his first to the landing, then bending his knees to allow for the low ceiling, finally to the foot of the stairs. Harry was nervously waiting for him.
Wow, this is quite the...
I mean, he carried Buffalo Bill down the stairs.
Folded in half.
Folded in half. The two undertakers could hear May in the kitchen. As quickly as possible, Buffalo Bill was unfolded and returned to the cooling board. The cooling board and Mr. Cody were ceremoniously lowered to the floor. His arms were folded across his chest and the sheet covered the stiff body. Suddenly, Uncle Joe remembered the dead man's hair was still on the dresser. He raced back up to the stairs to fetch it. When he breathlessly returned, Uncle Joe plopped the golden locks onto the smooth pate of the corpse and respectively covered the body. Harry's eyelids fluttered a bit, but he didn't faint.
I don't know how he got through that.
I don't either. I sometimes, and I don't know where I get this, Mom, but sometimes I have those moments where I laugh. Like, I don't know how I would have reacted in that moment.
Yeah, we both have that.
Yeah, where it's not a disrespectful thing. It's like I don't know what to do. Ha ha. So, but just in the nick of time, the horizontal corpse was covered. May appeared at the kitchen doorway. "I don't have much money," she said. Uncle Joe's heart filled with joy. "Dear lady," he said in his deepest, most melodious voice, "Olingers will consider it an honor to provide the funeral and burial of your brother. There will be no cost to you." Harry gasped in disbelief. May Decker's face reflected her relief. Thank you very much." "You're most welcome, Miss Decker," soothed Uncle Joe, keeping a tight grip on his precious cargo. Oh boy. William Cody was deposited in the basement of the funeral home, and Uncle Joe went about returning the folk hero to the image that had stirred the world. The great man would not topple from his pinnacle of glory. Uncle Joe would see to that. That evening, 5 men of Denver's inner circle sat around the table on the second floor of Olinger's funeral home. They were planning a farewell party for Buffalo Bill like the world had never seen. It was decreed by the state legislature that Mr. Cody's body lie in the rotunda of the state capitol. On January 15th, 1917, funeral services were held at the Elks Lodge, number 17. There was a fine parade and condolences from presidents, governors, clergymen, and dignitaries from all over the world. The world had not heard the end of Buffalo Bill. A still-lined vault was being prepared for the top of Lookout Mountain. After the parade and funeral, Buffalo Bill's finally appointed corpse was whisked away and again hidden in the basement of Olinger's funeral home. It was there, in the musty half-light, that Uncle Joe would slip away from time to speak softly to the great man while giving him another shot of embalming fluid. The following June, William Buffalo Bill Cody made his final journey, put on his last great show. 3,000 automobiles transported the merry mourners up to the mountain. At the grave, there were long and elegant eulogies. There was an 11-gun salute. Cody's fine bronze coffin was open and protected by glass. Until the very last minute, the mourners could gaze upon Uncle Joe's handiwork. There are many stories about Buffalo Bill, but this one you'll not read in the books. This story was told to me by my great uncle, Joseph E. Bona.
That was a good story.
Oh my gosh.
Well written.
Oh, it's beautiful. I don't even have words for it. But after all of this, Joseph, he must have needed a vacation, because in June of 1917, so remember, Cody was buried on Memorial Day, so that next month, he decided to take a trip in his Cadillac to Chicago. Now, the only reason I know this is because he took an ad out in the Denver Post, and here is what it said. I am driving my 8-cylinder Cadillac to Chicago, leaving Denver between June 30th and July 2nd. I can accommodate 4 people and would be glad to talk to anyone going in that direction who would enjoy this splendid overland trip. Called Joseph E. Bona.
Oh, wow.
I know.
He didn't want to go by himself.
He didn't want to go by himself. In this day and age, you wouldn't dare do that.
No.
I mean, my goodness. His Cadillac, though, that made me laugh.
I know.
So the big next event in Joseph's life was on May 20th, 1918, when he was drafted into the Army and sent to Fort Logan in Colorado.
Wow, how old was he?
He was in his 30s, because I think he was born...
Oh, well, the war was going on.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So he was born in 1887, so...
Yeah, so he was like 30.
But yeah, he was drafted into because of World War I. So I'm not really sure what he did during his time in the service, but he was only in the service for 6 months because World War I had ended on November 11th, 1918. But during this time, he had met Margaret Guessing in Denver, and no one is really sure how the two met, but it is believed that they met before 1918 because there is a story that he would always carry her photo with him when he was in the military.
Oh, okay.
So they had obviously met before then,
right.
But nobody's sure when.
She didn't want to go with him then.
Actually, she got called to, she didn't get drafted, obviously, but she served in the Red Cross.
Oh,
and she went to California while he was gone. And so Margaret, she was a well-known fashion model in the Denver area. And she was actually one of the first models for the Daniels and Fisher store.
Oh.
Yeah, Mom and I have a lot of good memories there.
Yeah.
She was known as Denver's most beautiful model. And not only was she a model for the fashion stores in Denver, but she was also a fashion model for newspaper advertisements. And she even appeared in a silent film one time. Margaret was born in Kansas in July of 1890, but her family moved to Denver, Colorado when she was a pretty young girl. And her family, they actually called her Bobo.
Huh.
Isn't that funny? I don't know. They couldn't find out why or where it came from. But to most people, she was known as Marge throughout her life. And on February 5th, 1918, the couple married in Detroit, Michigan. Apparently, Joseph proposed to Margaret and told her that he wanted to move back to Chicago where his family was. But she said the only way she would marry him is if they stayed in Colorado. And obviously he agreed.
Oh, okay.
So, and I'm not sure what brought them to Detroit, Michigan to get married.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I don't know if they just liked it there. It was close to Chicago, closer to Chicago, right, where his family was from. He was a car guy. I have no idea.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
He was trading in his Cadillac.
That's true. Yeah. So Joseph and Margaret, throughout their life, they would throw lavish parties, and they had some pretty famous friends. One newspaper said of Joseph, quote, "He had friends around the world and was a friend and companion to a number of celebrities, including Bing Crosby."
Oh, wow.
They would entertain a lot of their friends at their summer home that they named Bona Vista. And so for people from Colorado, that's kind of funny because there's an actual town in Colorado called Buena Vista, but his last name.
Right.
And then Vista means view. This summer home, it was in the Indian Hills, which is southwest of Morrison, Colorado. So it was not developed then. So I'm sure the Vista views was beautiful at that time.
There was nothing out there.
No, there's nothing out there. Yeah. And the house or the home, it was a rustic lodge. That was kind of the theme of it. And it had a stone foundation. And the house is actually still there today, but it's been covered with stucco. And so what happened was George Olinger, he had bought a huge parcel of acres of land out there and to sell them off as like summer homes.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering why the home was still there.
Yeah.
And the property wasn't all bought up and I think developed into something else.
Exactly. I think everybody who bought a home out there probably had like 2 acres.
I got it.
Yeah. Okay. And so when Joseph bought his from Olinger, he named it Bona Vista. And so if they weren't hosting parties at their summer home, they would throw parties at various country clubs around the Denver area, like the Mount Vernon Country Club, the Denver Country Club, the Cherry Hills Country Club.
Wow.
Oh, fancy. And it was said that when they were throwing their parties, they were very well dressed. Joe would always wear a suit and a tie, and Margaret would always have her furs on. And so the couple, they actually bought another home near Kremling, Colorado. And that was, where they did kind of, I guess, more relaxing. They would do a lot of fishing, and you guessed it, they would also host parties. And now when they weren't at their 2 mountain homes, they lived at the Norman Apartments on South Downing Street. These apartments, they were described as luxury apartments with 9-foot ceilings and mahogany doors. And the apartments are actually now listed on the National Historic Registry.
Oh, so they're still there.
They're still there. Yep. I actually looked them up online and they're pretty cool. I found one article that actually described what Joseph and Margaret's apartment looked like. And apparently they had white wool carpet throughout the whole house.
Wow.
Even extending to their like overhang porch. But they had the porch glassed in. And so they just had white wool carpet throughout the whole apartment.
Wow.
And there was even a white grand piano in the living room. So
I wonder who played that.
Maybe Margaret.
Yeah.
With her entertainment back.
Right.
I mean, he could have too, but I would guess maybe her.
They're probably condos now.
Probably. Yeah, probably. Joseph, he became the godfather to Marilyn Van Derber, and her father was Frank Derber, and he worked at Olinger's. So that was how Joseph and Frank had met. And Marilyn, she would go on to become Miss Colorado in 1957 and then Miss America in 1958.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I thought this was kind of a cool story. One of their nieces talked about how when she was younger, her and her family would go to Joseph and Margaret's apartment for Christmas Eve every year. She said her and her siblings were so excited but anxious at the same time to go because their mother would inspect them from head to toe before they went over to the apartment to make sure that they looked absolutely perfect. And she said that when they got there, her and her siblings would just sit on the couch because they knew they couldn't touch anything. The carpet's white, for crying out loud. Right. I mean, but she said, as they're sitting on the couch, the view from their apartment of the city lights at Christmas time was just absolutely beautiful.
Oh, I bet it was.
Can you imagine
being there on Downing?
Oh, that was probably beautiful. And then in 1921, George Olinger offered Joseph to become part owner of the business. And I think George and Joseph were really close. I think they were really good friends. And George also said, besides just being good friends, that this was basically a reward for Joseph being such a loyal and hard worker. However, they did have an understanding that if Joseph ever left the company, he would sell back his shares to George.
Well, they were probably great friends. He bought that land from him.
Exactly. Yep. And Joseph, he was known for kind of a famous expression. He would say, "It's a pleasure to die with Olingers." So, yeah, he was probably pretty loyal to the company, I would say. Now, I found a really funny article that I think gives kind of an insight into who Joseph was. And I'm just going to read the article because I don't know how to sum this up. And so this article, it was published in the Denver Post on December 6, 1922. The headline reads, 15 nurses from St. Joseph's Hospital held as witnesses, but booze turns out to be coffee. So that's the headline. So the article reads, 15 nurses from St. Joseph's Hospital were given quite the shock of their lives Tuesday night when the police riot squad swooped down on the Fire Engine House number 7 at West 36th Avenue and Tejon Street, where the nurses were being entertained by Joseph Bona and Frank Farmer of the Olinger Mortuary. Fire Lieutenant Frank Lyon was arrested, and arrested is in quotes, on a charge of having booze in his possession, and the police seized several bottles of moonshine. the nurses were given a ride to jail as witnesses. So remember, this is Prohibition time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is a big deal. Lyon was sent before Captain William Wolfe, and the charge was read to him. A bottle of the booze was handed him. Lyon tasted. "Why, that's coffee," he declared. "Of course," said Captain Wolfe. "The joke's on you." And the nurses were released after inspecting the jail. So they put them in the jail because back then they used to hold witnesses in jail.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like AKA false imprisonment. I mean, like you don't hold witnesses. And so then it goes on to say, it was revealed that the mortuary officials had arranged the raid as a treat for the nurses who were the party guests and had planted the coffee as evidence.
So it was all a joke?
It was all a joke. And the police department and department were all in on it.
Wow. Those nurses were probably like...
Oh, they were probably terrified. 15 of them. They arrest them, put them in a prison cell. Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow. He was quite the character.
He was quite the character.
I never forgot that.
I'm sure their descendants probably still tell that story.
Right. That's a great story.
It's so great. So now Joseph, we talked about this earlier a little bit. He liked his cars. You know, he had that Cadillac that he was driving to Chicago. And he drove some pretty fancy cars. However, because of this, he also fell victim to car theft quite a bit. So on October 28th, 1924, Joseph called the police and reported that his large and brand new touring car had been stolen. So the police, they come over to his house, they take his statement and get a description of the car. So the police leave and go out on patrol looking for the vehicle. And the police, they actually end up spotting the car, but the thieves spotted the police at the same time. As soon as they spot each other, a gunfight broke out.
Good grief.
On the streets of Denver, yeah.
There goes his car.
So, yeah, there goes his car, exactly. But the thieves, they were able to get in the car and get away because, again, he had fancy cars. It was probably a pretty fast car for back then. And so the next day, the vehicle, it was actually found in Lafayette, Colorado. But unfortunately, the car, it was not in great shape. It was banged up and had bullet holes in it.
Oh, so it did.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if they ever caught the thieves, though. So in 1925, Joseph, he actually retired from Olinger's and sold his shares of the company back to George. Now, there were no hard feelings between Joseph and George. Their friendship was fine. Joseph, he just wanted to focus on a company he had started called the Imperial Investment Company. And it was some kind of a financial company, but other than that, I'm not really sure. But the 1930 census, it does state that Joseph was in the oil field industry. So,
okay.
Maybe it was something to do with oil, I would guess. But by 1933, he was back working for Olinger Mortuary again.
Oh, wow. I'm
not really sure what happened to the company. I tried Googling it and looking at the state records. I couldn't find anything though. But that same year in 1933, a 10-year-old boy, Alan Ford, he passed away in the hospital from pneumonia. And the boy and his sisters, they sold newspapers in downtown Denver, and they were known to many prominent businessmen in the area. And Alan's father had been out of work for a while, but recently had started working at a CCC camp in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Oh, wow.
Where Mom and I are sitting right now. So the family, they had little money. And the hospital, they called Olinger's Mortuary after the little boy passed away. And Joseph actually went to the hospital to get the little boy's body. And, once he got to the hospital and kind of learned the family situation, he actually offered to pay for the funeral and burial of little Alan out of his own pocket.
Oh, wow. He's a good man.
Yeah, he is. He's got a good sense of humor and a good heart.
Right.
Obviously, he paid for it, like we said, but he also arranged the entire funeral for the family. So they didn't have to do anything because the father was in Grand Junction. He had to get back here or back there. I say back here. We're sitting in Junction. So yeah, that was kind of shows another side of him a little bit.
Right.
But Joseph and Margaret, they also loved, besides throwing their parties and working, they loved to travel. And in fact, in 1927, they went on a Mediterranean cruise and a tour of Europe. And they planned to be gone for 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, back then.
Third of the year right there. And so this made me laugh because when they got back from their 4-month Europe trip, it was in the paper. It just announced, Joseph and Margaret are back. And now they plan on spending the next 4 months at the Brown Palace in Denver.
Wow.
Yeah. So they rented a room when they got back from...
They didn't have their homes? Or?
I have no idea. I know at one point they did let their Norman apartment go for a while. So maybe that this was the year that they let that apartment go so they could travel. And so then they stayed at the Brown Palace Hotel. And so the Brown Palace is a famous hotel in downtown Denver. It's
very, very fancy.
Very fancy. You can have tea there. And yeah, Mom and I have been there, and it's pretty cool. It's very pretty. So, while they obviously lived a life of luxury, they did give back to the community quite a bit. They would donate to numerous charities and hospitals in the Denver area. And like we just talked about how, Joseph, he paid for that little boy's funeral. So at some point, though, Joseph's parents and siblings, they moved to Denver from Chicago, and all of his siblings did. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the dates and stuff, but they started showing up in the 1930s and 1940s census in Denver. So I bet that, because he wanted to move back to Chicago.
Right.
So I bet.
Yeah, that probably made him happy.
It made him happy, yeah. Now, in 1936, Joseph had another vehicle stolen. The paper reported it as being a very expensive vehicle, and the authorities, they actually found this vehicle in Santa Fe, New Mexico about a month later.
Good grief.
No, he was not very lucky with cars. He actually had his car parked in a parking garage in downtown Denver, and there was a parking garage attendant who quit that same day that his car got stolen. His name was Thomas. And when the authorities found his vehicle in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there was some document that had the name Tom on it, but they never caught the guy.
Wow. So he took it. Oh, that's pretty neat that they can find them that far away. But in, what was this, 36?
36, yeah. So that same year, Joseph and other prominent Italians in the Denver area were invited by the Denver Post to join them at Frontier Days in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So if you're not sure what Frontier Days is, it's annually held in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's a huge rodeo. Back in the day, they used to have stagecoach
races
and shows and stuff. They have the rodeo still, but it's concerts and vendors
like
and stuff.
Big fair.
It's like a big fair, yeah. And so in Cheyenne, Wyoming it's a beautiful, beautiful capital. Like you wouldn't even think it's a capital because it's so small, but it's a beautiful place. So then in 1939, Joseph was elected as a director of the National Selected Morticians.
Oh.
And so that was a really big honor for him.
Right, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's huge. It just kind of solidifies all the work that he's done and shows how hard he's been working. In November of 1944, the Bona family, they celebrated his parents' 60th wedding anniversary.
Oh.
And his father, unfortunately, was ill at this time and was in the hospital. So the family, they spent a lot of time at the hospital celebrating. Sadly, though, the next month, his father passed away at the age of 85. Then 3 months to the date, his mother passed away at the age of 79.
Oh, wow.
But moving forward, in 1948, there was some road construction happening near their home, the Bona Vista home. And so the construction company, they were actually replacing an old bridge near Joseph's home. And they basically needed to destroy this bridge and decided, hey, let's blast it with dynamite. And it sounds like the company got a little zealous with the dynamite because the blast, it was so powerful, it broke the windows in Joseph and Margaret's home.
Wow.
Whoopsies. They said, though, in the paper, that was the only damage that was done.
Yeah, you'd wonder about the foundation.
Exactly. So we talked earlier about Joseph's sense of humor. Well, in 1962, he called to check on his friend, Paul Maranzino. And Paul at this time was sick with the flu. And he decided that he would tell Paul a story to help him feel better. And so here is the story. It is titled, Please Stop This Coffin. So Joe inquired of my health and told the story of the mortician who operated in Central City. Seems he got a client and laid him away properly. Then the client, casketed and prepared, was loaded on a horse-drawn hearse for burial. En route, the road was over some very steep and rugged terrain. The casket slid out of the hearse and began sliding toward town. It raced down Main Street and right through the doors of the apothecary pharmacy. It slid across the floor and smashed into the drug counter. Standing on its end with the lid open, the druggist asked what he could do. And the corpse answered, I want something to stop this horrible coffin.
The corpse?
So now Paul, he actually wrote columns for the Rocky Mountain News, and he published this in the Rocky Mountain News on October 7th, 1962. So that's how I was able to find this story, but I thought that was pretty cute.
That's cute.
So the Denver Post, they actually came to Joseph and Margaret's home during the Christmas season in 1963 to see how their home was decorated. And the reporter described the Christmas tree as being 7 feet tall and decorated with white and had crystal ornaments hanging all over the tree, along with Italian wheat lights. Have you ever heard of Italian wheat lights?
No.
ChatGPT helped me out a little bit here. So it says, Italian wheat lights are a style of Christmas tree lights known for their delicate and vintage charm. They typically feature small wheat-shaped bulbs that emit a soft glow, creating a cozy and nostalgic atmosphere. And so it goes on to say that they're often associated with traditional Italian holiday decor, and these lights are designed to complement both classic and rustic styles, and kind of goes on and on. And so when you look it up, it's just like those tiny, tiny little bulbs. They don't really pop out on the tree. It almost kind of blends in with the tree. And so if you have like white Italian wheat lights, it almost looks like snow on the tree because they're so hard to explain what it actually looks like. So Google it and look at a picture. You'll know immediately. You're like, oh, okay, I know what that is. I've just never heard them.
I've never heard it called that.
Referred as, Italian wheat lights. And it literally took me going to ChatGPT to figure out what the wheat part meant. So... But on Joseph and Margaret's 50th wedding anniversary, which was in 1969, they had, of course, a party to celebrate. And Joseph made a toast to Margaret, and I thought this was really sweet, so I want to read it. So he said, "Now to this girl I raise my glass. To Marge, my dear, my own true lass. Heaven's best gift, my joy, my pride. God grant me this, she not leave my side."
Oh,
I know, I thought that was really cute for their 50th anniversary. Sadly, though, 6 years later, on August 15th, 1975, Margaret, she passed away. She was 85 years old. She was buried at Mount Olivet, and she had been ill for a few years before her death. She actually passed away in a nursing home. Now, after Margaret's death, Joseph, he was said to be still very active in his older age, and he's in his late 80s at this point. He was constantly seen out and about, shopping, running errands and stuff. And he would even still go into the office 2 days a week, even though he was retired. In February of 1978, Joseph had a stroke and was taken to Rose Medical Center, where he passed away shortly after. And he was 90 years old when he passed away.
Oh, well, they all lived long.
They lived a really long life. Joseph, he was buried at Mount Olivet next to Margaret, and Olinger Mortuary did take care of both of their bodies. Yeah. Yes. I do want to end with a quote from the book that I originally found Joseph in. So the book is called Colorado and the Italians in Colorado. And the quote says, "Italians in the West are indeed proud of Mr. Bona, and he has endeared himself to the hearts of many through his beneficiaries and helpful goodwill."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I thought that was a good way to end the episode.
He was an interesting man.
He was super interesting, and I think he is a guy to be proud of.
Right.
So we have a ton of pictures that we'll post on Instagram and our social media. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, follow. And we hope you enjoyed listening to the life story of Joseph Bona. And we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.